Our next guest is a former security leader at eBay and PayPal, and he served as chief security officer at Facebook, Uber, and Cloudflare. Today, he leads his very own security consulting firm and is known worldwide for his prominent role in shaping how companies handle cybersecurity incidents, including a legal case that you may recall stemming from a 2016 security incident at Uber that raised complex questions. Questions about corporate disclosure obligations, the liability of CISOs, but also the responsibility of company leadership in security breaches. In his keynote address, Joe Sullivan will share firsthand insight into how the role of security leadership has evolved. He'll spotlight the emerging risks that demand our attention, but also the opportunities that today's and tomorrow's security leaders must seize. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm round of applause to Joe Sullivan.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here. Thank you for the indulgence of letting me speaking in English. My high school French is not that good. So my career is a story of zero trust in a certain sense. I spent my first 8 years with the United States Department of Justice. I had the privilege of being the first full-time cybercrime federal prosecutor in the United States. And what that meant was that I would go around Silicon Valley and talk to companies and say, tell me about your cybercrime issues so that we can prosecute the bad guys. And the companies would say, we don't trust you. We don't have any cybercrime. There were no disclosure obligations in 2000 when I was starting those conversations. And I had to try and build trust. I had to say, we don't want to go after you. We want to go after the people who are targeting your customers. And little by little, we started to build trust, and we started to do cases together. And then after a couple of years, I switched over. I left the government and went to eBay. And my job at eBay was to oversee our fraud investigations team. And as part of that job, I traveled around the world speaking with law enforcement and explaining how they could do cases. Believe me when I tell you, showing up at police stations in 2002 and saying, hey, I'm here from eBay, I would like to talk to you about cybercrime and we could use your help, there was not a lot of trust. And then certainly when I went to Facebook, it was more of the same. But my job inside these companies was always to try and build bridges between the public and private sector. I testified in Brussels several times. I testified before the US Congress multiple times. I went to China, I went to India, I went to lots of different countries to talk about how do we get the public and the private sector to work together. Because something I came to understand pretty quickly was that cybercrime is different from all other types of crime in one way. Most of the data that's needed to hold people accountable for when they do bad things on the internet resides in the hands of the private companies. And we want it that way. We don't want our governments to have direct access to all of that data because of personal privacy. And so because of our privacy principles, we have this tension when it comes to cybersecurity that makes all of our jobs harder. We have to work together between the public and the private sector, and yet there's not a lot of trust. In 2016, President Obama in the United States appointed me to his Presidential Commission on Cybersecurity, and we tried to tackle this. And we continue to push to develop rules to allow the private and public sector to work together. But the laws are still evolving quickly, but not quickly enough, because technology is evolving even faster. So I'm going to tell you a story of something that I obviously regret very much, a situation when I was at Uber. What I found was that there was no trust. Over the course of my career, I've mentored a lot of security leaders around the world. And I used to get phone calls, and they would say, Joe, will you help me prepare? I have an interview to become a Chief Information Security Officer, and I want to know how to do it well. I want to be able to speak to the CFO and the CEO and all the other leaders about cybersecurity. And about 4 or 5 years ago, that started to change. Now, when I get those calls, they're different. The call I get now is, Joe, I've been asked to interview for the Chief Information Security Officer role. Do I even want to do that job? It seems scarier than it used to be. It used to be a technical job. It used to be a job where you were fighting the bad guys. Now the tension between the private and the public sector has gotten so high, the trust has gotten so low, that people are afraid to take the role because of cases like mine. So in some ways, I've spent my whole career trying to get the public and private sector to work together, and I've become the opposite, the poster child of the public and private sector not working together. And I'm here today as part of my effort to try and fix that. So what is the story? What happened at Uber? So when I joined Facebook, it was tiny. It was smaller than MySpace. We were a tiny little company, and I built the security team from less than 5 people to hundreds, and we became a large public company. And I was recruited in 2015 to go to Uber to do the same thing. So I left Facebook in the spring of 2015, and I went to Uber and inherited a security team of 2 people. At that point, Uber was already valued at over $40 billion and was operating almost globally the way it is now. But the security team was tiny, and I took over responsibility for safety of riders and drivers, fraud, cybersecurity, physical security, executive protection, and everything else. And I started to build out the security organization, and I was fortunate. Over 40 people from the Facebook team came with me to help me at Uber, and we hired hundreds of more people. But in the middle of it all, in 2016, we had a security incident that we thought we resolved quite well and didn't think much of it until about a year after that security incident in the fall of 2017. In the United States, we have an important holiday called Thanksgiving. It happens usually around the 3rd or 4th week of November. And I would always take that week off from work to go with my family up into the mountains where we would get ready for ski season. And so I took the week off from work. And on Tuesday, I was in a grocery store with my kids. And I got a couple of emails. One of the emails was from a reporter, and it said, "I'd appreciate comment on your ouster and the hacking incident." And I'm like, what? I still work at Uber, and I don't know what hacking incident they're talking about. The other email that I received was from the legal department at Uber, and it said, attached is an agreement you can sign that says that you resigned. And what had happened was the company decided to retell the story of a security incident from a year before. A year before, when the company had a different CEO and a different general counsel. Because Uber, in the year between 2016 and 2017, had one of the craziest years in the history of all companies in the history of companies. In that, Travis Kalanick, who was the original founder and CEO of Uber, was forced out, and most of the executive team with him. I was fortunate enough, I thought, to have survived that purging, and so I was still the chief security officer in the fall of 2017. But what happened was the company decided it was time for me to go as well. So while I was up in the mountains, my own team used the technology I'd rolled out to brick my computer and phone. So I was in the mountains far away, and I could not even respond as this story went global. My phone was locked. I couldn't unlock it because of the device management software. But I could see the texts and calls coming in like crazy, but I couldn't answer them. And then, Twitter and everything exploded. And I had to figure out, how do I deal with this situation? How do I tell my side of the story? I basically couldn't. So I left Uber then, obviously, and I had to pick my life back up. Went into a funk. Grew a beard, hid out in the mountains, tried to pretend that the whole thing didn't happen. And then a few months later, after my friends and family pushed me and picked me back up and said, get back out there, you love doing cybersecurity, I was fortunate enough in the spring of 2018, even after all that, to get a job at Cloudflare, which at that time was a small private company. And I joined Cloudflare, and again, I built their security team from a few people to a large team, and of course, I got to see Cloudflare has a booth here at this conference today, and is doing quite well and is a very successful company with more than 20% of the internet's traffic going through it. So I got to get back on my feet, and I got to do real cybersecurity work again, and I loved it. And then, for the second time, I got to learn from the media that I was going to have another fall. Except this time was even worse. My daughter called from Texas and said, Dad, are you home? What's going on? Are you in jail? Because the news, the United States government did a press conference, the FBI did a press conference, and said that they had arrested me. Well, they hadn't. I was sitting at home. It was August of 2020. That was the heat of COVID times. I was sitting at my desk working in a meeting for Cloudflare. I was on a Zoom meeting when I'd supposedly been arrested because it was a false press release. The FBI eventually withdrew the press release, and soon, hopefully, they'll send an apology. I was charged in a crime. I was charged with 2 counts. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the details, but essentially they were 2 things. One, that I had obstructed justice because we didn't tell the government about our security incident at Uber that had happened in the fall of 2016. And 2, I had committed something called misprision of a felony, which is almost like you helped someone else get away with a felony, is a simple way to think about it. And they said, and what the government said was that I helped someone else to get away with a felony because the people who had broken into Uber, in the government's eyes, were hackers, not security researchers, as my team had seen them. And so they said, we helped them get away with a crime, so I should be charged with that too. I disagreed. I didn't think I'd done anything wrong. I didn't think my team had done anything wrong. And so I went to trial. This is a drawing from the trial that was done by one of my daughters. In the United States, you're not allowed to have cameras in federal courtrooms. The whole trial, I wore a mask because it was COVID. It was required. Only the person who was testifying could take their mask off. So the jury in the trial never saw my face. They just saw a tall man in a suit with a mask who'd worked at Uber, which it turns out is not a good look because even though we thought we won the trial, my lawyer said, don't even testify. This is an easy victory. The jury found me guilty on both counts. So we have this drawing. My daughter Celia drew this. She was in high school at the time. She's now in college. She actually studied here in Lille last summer, and her French is much better than mine. So let me take you back to why we thought we didn't do anything wrong during the incident. When I was at PayPal, we published the first ever responsible disclosure policy by a company, which is where we said to security researchers, come tell us about your the vulnerabilities in our platform. We won't go after you. We won't prosecute you. We won't sue you. We won't say bad things about you. Because we thought, as a company at PayPal, that it was in our best interest to find out about all the vulnerabilities. When I went to Facebook, right after I got there and took over security, we published a responsible disclosure policy. And then soon after that, when I went to Uber, we immediately published a responsible disclosure policy. When I got to Facebook, we launched, I think, the third ever corporate bug bounty program after Google and Mozilla. And we started paying out millions of dollars to researchers. And when I got to Uber, we did the same thing. I would love to talk about bug bounty programs and security research and the importance of supporting that community, but that's for a different day. We had the incident, which happened like this. We got an email. It said, we found a vulnerability. I turned it over to the bug bounty team. They worked with the researchers. We documented everything centrally in a tracker. We treated it like any other investigation. Over 30 people at the company worked on the investigation and knew about it. We had legal involved because we had a policy that said include legal. We even included the communications team. The legal team and the communications team were invited to all meetings during the incident. Legal department said at the time in 2016, you don't have an obligation to disclose this to the government based on their reading of the law at that time. We found the people responsible. We interviewed them. We physically sent a member of my team to go meet in person with the two young men, a 19 and a 20-year-old, who'd found the vulnerabilities and reported them to us. We sent a member of my team who was a former Central Intelligence Agency interrogator who specializes in interviewing people. He prepared an 8-page report for my team articulating that these people did not have malice in their intent and that they wanted to get paid as a bug bounty. Now, the interesting thing was the jury, when they were looking at this, the way the law was written, the jury didn't need to find that I had any intent to deceive the government when our company didn't disclose this. They didn't even need to show that I had anything to do with the decision by the company as to whether to disclose it. So I could just live over in operational security land and do my job, and by law, I could be held accountable if the company made the wrong decision on disclosure. Likewise, when it came to the bug bounty question, the issue was, could a company, after a researcher has found a vulnerability, so entered into your environment without permission, they found the vulnerability, and then they turned to us and said, hey, we found the vulnerability. The United States government has taken the view to this day that the second they broke into our environment, broke in by finding that vulnerability, they had violated the law. And there was no way we could give them permission after the fact. Even though for years the advice bug bounty lawyers have always told us, and what our lawyers told us then is, you can give permission after the fact. So in a sense, I didn't have to, the government didn't have to prove that I did anything wrong in personally deceiving the government, or even knowing that the company was deceiving the government. I lost the trial. I was despondent. I had to quit my job at Cloudflare. The company had already lost business because I had been under indictment for my last year and a half there. So what did I do? I reached out to all the different nonprofits that I think after about a month, I was despondent, I was down, stayed home, didn't want to talk to anybody. And then I realized I needed to get off my butt and do something. And so I reached out to all the nonprofits. Remember, I had been this well-known cybersecurity leader in the United States. I'd been on President Obama's Cyber Commission. Everybody knew me. And so I reached out to all the nonprofits I'd worked with in the past and said, can I do I just want to do work. I'll work for free, I'll volunteer. And they didn't want to be associated with me until I found one organization. And so I became the CEO of a nonprofit called Ukraine Friends. During my time at Cloudflare in 2022 and 2022 really, the most fulfilling thing that I had been doing was helping the US government help in Ukraine because we had been asked to help at Cloudflare. And so I'd gotten to do that, and I got to see what was happening on the ground from a technical standpoint and be involved defensively. So I asked if I could help. And so as a result, I've been to Ukraine quite a few times since then, and I'm the CEO of a nonprofit called Ukraine Friends. This is a picture of me delivering laptops to children in the Bucha region that was damaged heavily in the early fighting. I've been all over Ukraine. We put these stickers on each so I bring laptops. I get companies to donate laptops. We bring them over, and we give them out to kids stuck in remote school. And half the country is in remote school, still. And half of those kids can't afford a computer. And it's not like you can go on the internet and order a computer shipped to you in Ukraine. It just doesn't work like that when you're in a war zone. So we put together the sticker. The real version that you see on the laptops is in Ukrainian. But we quickly realized when we bring these computers to kids, I thought we were just going to be helping them with education, but it's a mental health thing for these kids too. It's an escape from the life around them. So literally in the last 3 weeks, I've had 3 large shipments of laptops go into Ukraine from different companies. Santander Bank was one of the recent organizations to donate laptops. Their CISO even did a very long, challenging swim last year to raise money for our nonprofit. So the lesson I learned is that when you're going through something tough, when you think your life is bad, go help someone else who's in a worse situation. I've learned through my many trips to Ukraine that no matter how bad I felt about my situation, there are people in the world who are dealing with much worse things than I am. And so I love my trips. My last trip was last month, and I'm already looking forward to the next one. My wife and children don't like when I go to a war zone, but they understand why. So after losing the trial and trying to pick myself back up, I had a sentencing hearing coming up before the judge. The United States government decided that I should go to prison. And they argued, before we went to actual court, they told us they were going to argue that I should get more than 2 years in prison to make an example, because they wanted the private sector to care more about working with the government, and so they wanted to make an example of me. And I didn't agree with that, and fortunately, a lot of other people didn't agree with that. The most amazing thing happened during that period of time between losing the trial in the fall of 2022 and my sentencing hearing in the spring of 2023. Hundreds of people sent letters to me to give to the judge. My lawyer said, we cannot give all these letters to the judge. It will be like a denial of service attack on the court, because how will they read them all? It will take them months. So we whittled it down to 186 letters, and we presented them. And I have to tell you, like, the 2 things that carried me through that period were, number 1, those trips to Ukraine, but number 2, the support of the cybersecurity community. All of you who do this work know how hard it is, and the tension between the public and private sector, and the pressure that people in this role feel. And so every day when one of those letters came into my inbox, it was like a pick-me-up. My heritage is at least partially Irish, and I've visited my relatives in Ireland, and I joke that what I went through felt like an Irish wake, but I got to live through it. I didn't get the testimonials after I died. I got to see all these letters of people writing and telling me stories. And that was another lesson I learned. All of you in cybersecurity, you help people every single day. And sometimes you don't even appreciate the help you give. Those of you who are executives, you help your teams, you help other organizations. You do things for people. It's the nature of our profession. It's a very noble profession in that regard. We don't go to work every day trying to make the most money for our company. We go to work every day trying to help people. So I lost the trial, but in the end, I won the sentencing. The judge said that he'd reviewed the evidence and it was not a cover-up. Like, if you Google my case, every article says it was a cover-up. The only person who said it wasn't a cover-up was the person who mattered, the judge. He said it wasn't a cover-up, and he gave me probation and said, go live your life. So I didn't have to go to jail. The judge also said another interesting thing. He said to the government, why isn't the CEO here? The CEO is the person who's ultimately in charge. And I've talked to so many people in the cybersecurity community about this point. The CEO sets the culture on security. The CEO gives you your budget. And the CEO is where the buck stops in terms of risk-making decisions. And so what we're seeing is a trend to move the responsibility to the entire executive team, which I think is where it should be. So I learned a lot of lessons. I think we need to err on the side of transparency. We need to make sure integrity is part of our operational processes. We always need to have a better dialogue and support with our general counsel. And we need to escalate if it doesn't feel right on the inside. And then most importantly, we got to stop this zero trust situation. We've got to work to build a partnership between the public and the private sector. The thing that I've been trying to do for my whole career. I have a lot more detailed advice that I sometimes can go into on, because I think fundamentally, we invest a lot in prevention. Like if you walk the conference floor here, there's so much on buy this product or use this to prevent. But at the end of the day, as security people, do you know what we get judged for? When we didn't prevent. So we've got to become better at incident response. We've got to invest more in our teams and in ourselves in responding well to these situations. As an individual, as a leader of a team, as a company. And there's a million things we can do that I unfortunately don't have time to cover today. But zero trust is a concept that exists not just in the elimination of networking. It exists in the introduction of people into this environment. Security is about trust, and we're not going to be able to stop the real attackers until we get the public sector and the corporations to work much better together. So thank you so much for your time. Very happy to be here with you, and look forward to a conversation after the session.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Joe Sullivan. A poignant testimony. I think everybody in the room is very much touched by your story. Thank you for sharing it with us and for sharing also your life lesson insights. We still want to pick your brain on a couple more topics, if you're okay with this. We have just several minutes left, and we have questions that just came in, mainly about what's your outlook on all the new technologies that are coming into the cybersecurity arena? How do you balance the urgency of digital transformation on one hand and the fact of maintaining a robust security posture, especially in the wake of all these technologies that are bringing along new vulnerabilities?
Okay. I think that right now is the most interesting time in my entire career in technology because of what's happening with artificial intelligence. It is changing everything so fast. The pace of change we can't even keep up with. And that is really challenging for all of us because we've got to run along next to the people who are doing all the innovation. This is the one insight that I've had in the last few months that I've come to really appreciate. The technology changes happening right now are making our jobs more important than ever because we started talking about AI about 2 years ago. In 2025, what are we talking about? AI meeting robotics, right? I'm actually, my first stop on this trip was with a European company that makes humanoid robots, and I'm helping them on a security project. And the most fascinating thing about it from a cybersecurity standpoint is not the technical implementation. I mean, there's a lot there, but the data implications. Right? Why did another US data center company do a big IPO last Friday? And why is there so much attention to like building out data centers and now we need more nuclear power? It's because it's about data. Right now, you can't just let the AI run a robot because we don't have enough data in the data centers. Why is Meta subsidizing giving out glasses? Because they're collecting 3D data. All the data in our warehouses is 2D data, right? It's about things that were on paper. But now the data centers are going to get filled up with three-dimensional data. Like if a waiter or a waitress navigates a restaurant How many decisions do they make before they put a plate in front of you? Which side do they come up on? Do they take your glass? Do they move? If a robot is going to do that, all of those decision-making pieces of data are going to end up in data centers. Who's going to secure all that data? The people in this room. And so our job is not getting easier, it's getting harder right now.
Now, people in this room want to know also, can you describe perhaps another situation where security considerations significantly altered or perhaps delayed digital transformation initiatives, and what are the type of lessons that you learned in the process?
I could give you an example just from this week with that meeting that I had where we're working with the robotic company. CAD design has been the same basically since the 1990s, but the CAD design systems were built in the 1990s. So with this robotics company, we're working through right now, how do we secure the CAD? Because if you're a robotics company in 2025, what is your most valuable asset? The intellectual property in your CAD system. But you can't get it to work with a modern single sign-on. So I'm in the middle of a negotiation with the CEO right now about, like, how do we migrate to a modern CAD environment without disrupting the production of robots for 6 months? Because you can't really change your design system halfway through the life cycle of a robot.
Right.
And those are the types of challenges that are just going to come up every single day in this job.
And that are going to continue to be raised. Thank you so much, Joe Sullivan. I think we give him a very warm round of applause. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Please.